First tonight, we start with a tragic story about the murder of a little baby boy. Jacob Crouch, who was just 10 months old, was subjected to what one detective called a living hell and a life of pain at the hands of Craig Crouch, the partner of Jacob's mother, Gemma Barton. Today, Crouch was found guilty of his murder. Barton herself was cleared of the same charge, but was convicted of causing or allowing Jacob's death. Our social affairs correspondent Jeremy Ball has this report, which some of our viewers may find distressing.
Jacob's lifeless body was found in his bedroom here on Foxley Chase at Linton near Swadlincote. It was brutal, the trial heard. He'd been kicked or stamped on, one of several vicious assaults which left Jacob with around 40 separate rib fractures. A smiling, happy baby video, but Jacob Crouch didn't live to see his first birthday. Jacob died alone in his cot only days after Christmas in 2020.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder.
This is the moment his mother, Gemma Barton, was arrested 6 days later on suspicion of Jacob's murder.
Gemma, try and breathe for a second. Try and breathe.
Then officers went upstairs to take Craig Crouch into custody. They both insisted Jacob's injuries were the result of accidents, but the police investigation found damning evidence.
They were quite good at hiding it. When there were visible bruises, they would raise them to family and give an explanation as to why Jacob had got the bruises. There was mention of him hitting himself with his rattle or his teething ring. The paediatric experts dismissed that. There were several refractures where they'd been fractured and were healing and then were broken again. No way they could be accidental.
Crouch was legally registered as Jacob's father, even though Barton was already 4 months pregnant with Jacob when they met. He encouraged brutal punishments when Jacob cried and even joked about it.
Very quiet in there. Killed him.
No.
All around if you had.
The couple's new relationship was built on secrets and lies. Crouch drove a forklift at JCB, but he convinced Gemma Barton he was one of the firm's directors on a 6-figure salary. And there was a bizarre request to their neighbours as Jacob's death was being investigated.
Everybody on this estate, the 25 houses, had got the same letter. It said, because our baby has died, please don't come round the house and offer any consolations or bring flowers. We want to just mourn the child alone, you know. But it just seems such a strange thing to do.
When you heard what had happened to that little baby?
It's horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
Ambulance, is the patient breathing?
By the time Crouch made this 999 call, it was already too late.
Gemma, are you sure you checked him at 5 o'clock?
OK, so I realise how distressing this must be for you. Do you feel the baby is beyond any help?
Yes.
And detectives found messages on his phone discussing bathing Jacob in bleach, as well as feeding him his own vomit. And there was a video clip filmed by a pool.
It quite clearly shows Craig Crouch holding Jacob, and he basically, you can see that Jacob is distressed and he's dunked into the swimming pool for a good period of time, what I would describe as a good period of time.
And what shocked you most about what that little boy went through?
The levels of violence were horrendous, a living hell. I mean, the amount of injuries that he had, the sustained period that they were inflicted over, it would have been completely normal for Jacob to have lived in a life of pain.
A life cut short so violently by a man who should have been caring for Jacob and who's now facing a life sentence.
Well, Jeremy joins me now. Jeremy, I mean, it's really tough to hear the details about what happened to Jacob, isn't it? And I imagine it must just be incredibly distressing for Jacob's extended family as well. Yeah,
it is tough. And today the police talked about how they've been left devastated, as they put it, by Jacob's murder. And as we've heard, they didn't know what Craig Crouch was doing because this couple was so good at making excuses for his injuries. And speaking on the steps of Derby Crown Court this afternoon, the detective who led this inquiry said he's hoping that this verdict brings the wider family some closure, that they can finally start the grieving process, and also to remember happier times, he said, with a much-loved child.
I mean, sadly, this bears really striking similarities to the death of Finlay Bowden.
It does. Both of them 10 months old, Both of them died at their homes in Derbyshire from horrifically similar injuries. You might remember that Finlay was killed by his parents in Chesterfield in the early hours of Christmas Day. Now, that was only 5 days before Jacob Crouch was murdered. The police told me that Jacob's case is different because social services weren't involved. But if there is any common factor, they say, it's the timing of this, because it was December 2020, right in the middle of that Christmas and New Year lockdown.
Yeah, and I mean, we say this after every tragic case like this, but what can be done, what is being done to prevent a repeat of tragedies like this?
Well, we've heard from Derbyshire County Council this afternoon who say they've got a new action plan called Keeping Babies Safe, which is still being developed along with other agencies, but they say it's already giving families in Derbyshire more support, and they say it is already improving babies' safety. And Crouch and Barton, well, they're due back in court this Friday for a sentencing hearing.
OK, Jeremy, thank you very much for that.